All right.
Yeah.
So this week, we are doing part three. Yeah, part three of this five-part series on our all-time greatest NBA players at each position, being the small forward position at the three this week. Is that correct?
Correct.
Cool, cool. I just wanted to check, yeah, in case I get confused, like we're doing something else.
Even I, like when I was putting the list together, I had a very quick moment where I was like, have we already done small forwards? Like, what if we were doing power forwards? That'd be pretty embarrassing.
Well, now we're going to debate, is that player a three or a four, right? But, that could be.
Yeah, no, I'm not playing that. I'm not playing that.
No, no, you don't think so?
I mean, I'm triple checking now that all of my players are small forward. That's what they're listed as the first point. So, and I'm even checking games played. I do wonder if I know that we'll be in agreement, but no, actually, I don't know that. I feel like we'll have the same five, maybe not the same order. It's always a little bit curious. We'll see.
I was looking at my notes before, and I was like, I really wanted to put Robert Horry in the top five. I really did. I really did.
What is it with you and your real love for obscure role players, just like Draymond Green, then Robert Horry? We should just do a top five role players. That would be where you can put Draymond Green at the top of the list.
I think I'm going first this week. Is that right?
Yeah, you go first.
All right. Number 5. Where's the stats here? Okay. 28. No, actually, I should probably figure out how to read this stat sheet in front of me, right? 27 points a game, 7 rebounds, 4 assists, 10-time All-Star, 2-time All-Star MVP. At least that's even right. 1-time MVP, 2-time NBA champion. Number 5 all-time greatest small forward is KD. I actually felt this was generous. I really considered putting Robert Horry above KD, including some other names, but I will give KD the credit that I think he is in the conversation was an all-time great, but I don't think he is great as many people sort of rate him. And he went and got those 2 rings by joining the 73-9 Golden State Warriors, okay, that already had a 2-time MVP, Steph Curry as an all-time point guard and an all-time shooting guard, Klay Thompson in the wings as well that we covered last week. And then he got his 2 rings. So until he gets a ring, off his own back, and his foot's not on the 3-point line when it comes to a clutch situation, I'm not moving him any higher on my list. What do you think?
I did not have KD at 5, but he's a little bit further up on the list.
Further up? You think he's worth being further up?
I think one thing I've noticed about myself in all this is I struggle with historic players a little bit. I don't like, so Elgin Baylor was a player that I looked at, and it was like, the stats are really, really impressive, but he was playing against, dudes that, again, mechanics on the weekend, right? It's a different era of basketball, so a different level of skill set. I think KD offensively is like one of the most talented players of all time. You look at the stature, you have to factor in the fact that if he doesn't get robbed, of almost 2 years with the Achilles injury, is there an extra championship to his name? Yes, it might be a part of a super team, but we've had Manu Ginobili came up in conversation last week for you, and I don't think that he's as successful on his own, whereas KD has at least demonstrated, potency on OKC and Brooklyn respectively. And I think, the championship bias is a tricky one, but I'll unpack that more of my argument when I pick him, I guess.
I think if anything I've discovered as we work through these lists is that I think winning weighs heavily in factor on my side. But, who do you have at number 5?
So I've actually got Scottie Pippen, number 5. Obviously, probably the least impressive stats of the other 4 players on the list, 16, 6, and 5 respectively. Had a little bit of a stint there when Michael went to play baseball, and his stats didn't really take much of a jump. They were pretty consistent with that, 20-point average. Obviously, he had a bit of a tarnished legacy once the Chicago era ended. Probably fitting more of almost a Draymond role or a Robert Horry role, but not without the championship success. And you can make a strong case to say that the championships that he has are strongly tied to Michael Jordan's presence and just how the fact that dynasty was put together. But you know, in a sense, you know, you look at the small forward world, this is the one thing, this isn't a scoring position. So these players aren't as high on the scoring averages as the other two positions, and they're supposed to be the Swiss Army knives. And I guess if you had to think of the Swiss Army knife, Scottie Pippen should be in everyone's, you know, lexicon of
I don't think the small forward position is not a scoring forward. I think the forward position is probably more a physical stature of a player that is not big enough to be classified as a true big, but not sort of tasked with as much ball handling or primary ball handling or offense creation individually versus the amount of points that they get. Like clearly KD gets points, and clearly some other players on these lists get points. I think it's really just a sort of a size thing, just like a center is the tallest player. Okay, a small forward is a player that plays like a forward, but is not, you know, not 6'10". You know, sort of falls between that sort of 6'6" to 6'8", 6'9" sort of range that plays that 3 spot. I guess that's I've never seen it as a scoring or non-scoring sort of role. It's just the role that you play on the lineup.
Well, I guess you look at it and, you know, you think about players like Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, even LeBron to a degree. I think small forwards, the reason why I say Swiss Army knife is because they're never isolated to just scoring. So Kevin Durant might be the anomaly in that standpoint, but the others have playmaking abilities, defensive abilities, just that general range of things. And then you look at the non-star players on teams that are at the small forward role and how they make their role kind of carved out, and it's 3-and-D players and those kind of things. But whatever works. Scottie Pippen at 5.
I have Scottie Pippen on my list. He's obviously not number 5. He is not number 4 because at number 4 I have Dr. J. So Julius Erving, looking at his stats here, 3-time NBA champion. Obviously scored plenty of points, 24 points a game back in the day, 8 rebounds, 4 assists, and obviously an iconic player, I think, through his era. Definitely another player that sort of really sort of improved the image, I guess, of the league and basketball as a sport around the world. We saw what he could do on the court. So I've, Dr. J at number 4.
We're in agreement. I also have Dr. J at number 4. So I think I know where we've potentially flipped on Scottie Pippen and Kevin Durant. I don't want to labor any points that you did. Obviously, one of the things for him is, the ABA stint. It's not to be held against him per se. It's just his stats would look a little bit different. I know that they got sort of combined, but, the quality of the league and, the teams that you verse are different when you're playing in 2 different leagues like that. So it's, it's a factor. But yeah, very influential player. I don't want to labor the point.
Oh, I'm interested how you've gone 3 then. Number 3. Yeah, I've actually got a question for you. I got a mind blank. What was Larry Bird's nickname?
Oh, jeez. I'm gonna have to check.
Look, we're supposed to be basketball fans here, and here we are trying to.
Larry Legend, right?
Larry Legend. Was it Larry Legend? Was it one of his nicknames? Larry Legend. Larry Legend at number 3. All right. Obviously, looking at the candidates for the small forward position, I think, Larry Bird has to be up there in the sort of conversation as somewhere in the top 5. Obviously, a legendary scorer. Average 10 rebounds a game from the 3 position. I think that was a big stat back in the day. Obviously, he played on a legendary Boston team. I didn't get to see Larry play at all, really, because I was too young. And so I guess you haven't seen him play at all, besides YouTube sort of stuff. But, even I guess his legend sort of lives on, that his ability to win, and they won 3 rings as well. 12-time All-Star. I've got him at number 3.
That's interesting. I don't have him at number 3. This is where I placed Kevin Durant. Obviously, the championships maybe aren't as impressive for Kevin Durant as they are for Scottie Pippen, but I just think Kevin Durant's role is a lot higher on, the team. I know that the Golden State thing is a bit of a black mark against his name, and it's kind of, I don't really know how you rectify that. So I think,
he has to win a ring somewhere else.
If he wins a ring somewhere else, he still doesn't outrank Scottie Pippen's 6 rings, but obviously we give him more credit. I think, look, this is potentially a future pod, right? Like, I think I mentioned this, like, what's the tiering list of an impressive championship ring? And, do we go with straight dominance, or do we go with, like the underdog story. So in Kevin Durant's case, like he essentially joined the team and created an unstoppable juggernaut and swept LeBron James's Cavs, which I believe the only people to do that besides the Spurs back when it was Baby Bron, essentially. So, there's some aspects there.
I'm gonna actually I'm gonna say Golden State never needed KD. I think they could have won more rings even without KD. But the fact that they could,
retool.
well, I think that's clearly, if you can retool by signing KD, you do that. Okay, no one's faulting that strategy. Okay, no one's faulting that strategy. If you can sign KD, any team would sign KD. Okay, but I didn't think they needed him to get over the line. Obviously, they fell short in that 73-9 season where they didn't close with that ring. They lost, I think, wasn't it? Coming back, Cavs came back from 1-3 down. It was a huge collapse. Let's be clear, okay. But the team still had enough talent, okay, to obviously retool, like you sort of said, and to still compete and really have a wide open window for another ring. But obviously KD came in and sort of really guaranteed that until the injuries hit, and then he obviously left. So I guess, but I think KD would move up my list if he won another ring in Brooklyn. Okay. In fact, he probably has an opportunity to win multiple rings still potentially in Brooklyn. Okay. But he's going to have to get started. Yeah. He's going to have to get going. Okay. And I guess, starting this season, making the playoffs is the first step. Okay. And then, I don't know whether the Nets can make any noise this season or not. I guess it's going to depend a bit on health as well. So who knows? But I guess you probably figured my number two, because I think number one play consensus, just like last week's one on the shooting guard position. I think that's pretty no-brainer. But number two, I do have Scottie Pippen at number two, and I guess you did allude to the fact his stats compared to many of these others actually in the top sort of 10 or 15 sort of rank that he could be considered, or players that could be considered, do not sort of stack up extremely impressively. But I'm going to say that the Bulls and Jordan is not Jordan without Pippen. I think that's something that it's been alluded to, but it's such a point of, to me, I guess, that's often is missed. It's not that Jordan made Pippen, or necessarily that Pippen made Jordan, but it was Pippen and Jordan was the Bulls in the 90s that was unbeatable, and that won those 2-3-peats in that sort of 8-year period. Okay, and it required both components. You take away one, and I don't think that ever happens. You can't get, I'm sure Jordan would have won rings, and you can make an argument that the Bulls take away Jordan was still potentially competitive, okay, in that sort of sense. But would Jordan have won 6 rings in the way that he did without Pippen and without ultimately also the supporting cast that was put around him? Okay, I'm going to say probably not, even though he's probably still potentially one of the greatest for all times.
I think it's kind of the great debate of, is a good boss more important than good employees? And I think that's the differentiator with there. I wouldn't put them on the equal tier, because I think Michael had a different role, a different responsibility, and obviously had more impact on a game than Scottie Pippen did. So it's that A-B situation. And so I think when we factor it in, yeah, completely agree. Michael's just as a beneficiary to Scottie as vice versa. But I think Scottie had 2 seasons on his own to show some impact, right? And you look at other players on this list and what they could do. And I think Scottie on his own, like if you we talk about Larry Bird, we talk about Julius Erving, Kevin Durant, we put them on other teams. They still are excellent players. Alphas clearly are going to lead teams to high success and whatever ceiling they can get. Scottie Pippen didn't demonstrate that. That's the difference. He was almost like the top tier B superstar, in terms of he will do everything that the A superstar needs to supplement, but isn't going to do any of the A stuff effectively well.
Look, again, I think those 2 years that Jordan went and played baseball and Scottie was the number one option on the Bulls weren't tooled to win those years. They were tooled to be competitive. I think Horace Grant left when Jordan left as well. He went to Orlando. A lot of that core sort of broke up, and a lot of that core was getting older. And they only retooled when obviously Jordan came back. And obviously Jordan came back and had a shortened season. They lost, I think, to the Magic, all right, when he came back. And only when they put that full season together, they obviously got Kukoc from obviously Europe, obviously super sort of European prospect there that was still very young, and Rodman, and Rodman. Okay. I don't think the Bulls, when Jordan left, were supposed to achieve more than ultimately that they did. They were still competitive, and Pippen's sort of that sort of player, just like LeBron has always. You've sort of always made that argument, in that sense that he's not necessarily your go out there and get every single bucket sort of player. He's that sort of I'm happy to go and do every bits of every single thing that helps a team win. Okay, and I think that is really important, to be considered. That that doesn't always sort of reflect very very heavily on the stat sheet to an extent.
Yeah, look, and I think, you look at obviously post Chicago, he goes to Houston with the failed experiment for that year. And then obviously finishes out at Portland. Does give Portland a bit of a role and, gets them to some form of success. I just think that the way that you view Scottie Pippen is that he's an additional piece, that second, third superstar. And I personally think, when we're talking about all-time greats and, if we had to assemble a basketball team to, beat someone else's, I don't think Scottie Pippen is number 2 on my list, obviously. But that's okay.
That's okay. That's okay. List. And number one, surely.
I haven't done number 2, man. You don't even know.
Oh, sorry, remember. Clearly. All right, who's number 2, Nick?
Number 2 is Larry Bird, obviously. Just potent shooting and almost like a stretch 4 or a stretch 3. Before it was even popular. You think about him in the modern era and what crazy stats he would get. You look at the fact that he had a shortened career from the age of 23 until 35. His stats are already pretty incredible. And I think that there was scope, in a different era, he's just as successful, if not more. And then obviously a part of the dynasty. And I also think, despite the fact being teamed up with very competent players, you could confidently say he would be okay wherever he went. It's not the same as the Scottie Pippen argument, but I think we've laboured that enough. Let's mutually agree on number 1.
Let me just pose one question here. Okay, so obviously you have, and I'm not going to argue. Larry Bird is a legendary player and could definitely be number 2 on this list that number 2 on your list. But if he was so legendary, how come he doesn't have 6 rings? How come he doesn't have more rings? Because I think winning rings, unless you're Robert Horry and you're in the right spot on the right team across multiple teams and and seasons and decades even, I think, for Horry. I think he won one as a rookie and won one all the way through when he was like 35, 36 or whatever. Okay. You have to have that level of ability. And that's why I had Scottie Pippen at 2 and above of Larry Bird, obviously.
I think Scottie Pippen's impact on a game was lower than Larry Bird's impact on a game. So to give Scottie credit for winning more titles, despite the fact that he played a lesser role, probably isn't a fair comparison. Obviously, Larry Bird as well went up against our number 1 point guard, and I guess when we get down the list, probably our number 1 or number 2 center. So he was coming up against quite a unique team that, it's a similar case for people who came up against the Bulls. Just came up against the dynasty. Did take 3 titles off them, considering that I think they met in the finals about 8 times. And that was the majority of his career. And that's probably another counter I'd make, is that he was legitimately contending pretty much any year that he was present, opposed to Scottie, who did have some years of obscurity there.
So at the number 1?
Yeah.
This is a no-brainer, right? LBJ is number 1. He's the king. He's the greatest small forward of all time. And the only debate left for him in however many seasons he's got left up his sleeve, which plays not that many, in all honesty, is that will he be number 1 and of all time? Will he be the greatest NBA player or basketball player of all time when everything is said and done? And unfortunately, he plays with Russell Westbrook, which we've covered.
They had a good day today. You see that? See that? They worked well today. They had one good game.
Yeah, I guess, yeah. But from a small forward perspective, I think you're going to agree that he's number one.
It is, yeah. So it's actually quite interesting. I'm looking at the basketball reference page. After the age of 27, he actually started playing random positions. So power forward, point guard. Even had a stint as shooting guard in his very first season, which is quite odd. Yeah, look, I mean, obviously nothing to labor about the point. For him, it's the extra 2-3 seasons, however many he plays, and then what his stats end up being. Obviously, I think it's probably a safer bet now than ever that he will get the Kareem scoring record. He'll be top 5 in assists and top 10 in rebounds and probably top 10 in steals and top 10 in blocks, and just have the longevity, really, of the career. And then, obviously, the GOAT status thing for him, it will always come down to the amount of finals. So, you know, in a really weird way, it works in his benefit that he made the finals so many times consecutively in an era where it's probably not going to be repeated again. The odds of making 8 straight finals, or was it 9, is a lot lower than, you know, even Michael didn't do that, and even people in the 80s struggled to do that. It's the record, though. That's what's going to hurt him, is that he lost a couple. Now, I remember reading an article way back saying that statistically speaking, he was an underdog more than people realize. He was supposed to lose a lot of finals, like he was supposed to lose in 07, and he was supposed to lose against the Spurs in the mid years. But obviously, the Dallas series is a bit of a black mark because they really should have won that one. If they had, you know, they end up having a three-peat and helping that legacy. Obviously, comes up against a Golden State juggernaut and doesn't get a fair shot at them the first year when 2 people go down, and then does get a really incredible title run with a 3-1 back, and then gets swept almost 2 years in a row when the KD comes along, then wins the weird bubble one. You know, he's been around. His narrative's probably a little bit harder to make because Michael's is nice and clean, right? Two three-peats, dominated an entire decade, better stats, you know, shorter time frame. But the LeBron case is interesting. I think if he wins one more championship, which doesn't look likely, but if he did for some reason, you know, that changes the conversation again.
I mean, there's LeBron out. He's got 4.
Yeah, he's 4 and I think he's either 4 and 8 or 4 and 7 in the 4 and 7 sounds like 4 and 7 in the finals, which is the problem, right? You think about it. If he had been 100% in the finals, he's got 11 titles, which is Bill Russell, right? In the modern era, that is unanimous GOAT, right?
Okay, sure. If you had, all right. If you had 11 rings from 11 attempts, you know, we all bow down to him. Okay, that's the reality. But I think, look, 5 rings puts him in Kobe territory. 5 rings puts him in Tim Duncan territory. You know, look, you know, I think he's probably fortunate that the small forward position doesn't have more competition.